was resourceful, energetic, and like any other country, we have our own ups and we have our own downs. And there are a lot of and there are a lot of also environmental challenges, just like any other country. We have a lot of environmental challenges like pollution, desertification, flood, gas flaring, bush burning, deforestation, of course, climate change, improper waste disposal, and many others. Just like every country has its own, depending on where you are. And all segments of the society are affected by such challenges. And because of that, because of the distributive nature of such challenges, every member of the society has a role to play, either to minimize this or to adjust, or if there is a possibility to end some of these challenges. And environmental communication has come a long way in trying to do that, because environmental communication is connected to knowledge, to awareness about issues of environment. It's also connected to behavior change. So in this presentation, I will examine how environmental communication can be used specifically to promote resilience, environmental or climate resilience in Nigeria. So when we talk about environmental communication, we are talking of a whole gamut of communication that is done in many ways. Many people, when we talk about environmental communication, they always fixate their mind to environmental mediated communication. Yes, a lot of the communication we study about environment is mediated, but there are also non-mediated. There are also campaigns, and it is not only about news, it is also about images, narratives. There are even anti-environmental communication, like climate deniers and what have you. All this is under the umbrella or gamut of what we call environmental communication. When we talk about communication, we know what it is. We must have all the ingredients or the elements. We tell our students, you don't define communication by just saying movement of message or what have you. We analyze the elements that are there in the communication: source, message, shared, meaning, channel, effect, context, feedback. But that has to do, when it comes to environmental communication, it has to do with the environment. Of course, naturally, there are many definitions about that. Even the environment itself, even communication itself. So also is environmental communication. So I just take one of the definition by ECRC, who see environmental communication as a communication of environmental related messages to various audience by all means, through all channels, personal, organizational, or mass medium. What are the components of environmental communication? There are a lot of things when we focus on environmental communication: rhetoric and discourse, the journalism part, participation part, social marketing and the campaign part, collaboration and even conflict about environment, of course, risk communication, which a lot of presentations here, they are going to discuss that, and also the presentation of nature or environment in popular culture or green marketing. These are some of the components, may not be comprehensive, but these are the key components of environmental communication. So you can see from that definition, even environmental communication is a very big amorphous concept. From this, we can look at subtypes of environmental communication. You see, some people will be concerned with only the forests. Some people will be concerned with marine. Some people are climate communication experts. And it can also be mediated or non-mediated, as I mentioned earlier. So we classify environmental communication also based on the channel, radio, TV, newspaper, online, etc., etc. Then, even within the mediated, and even the non-mediated, we have different formats of environmental communication: news, features, documentary, discussion, real, textual, etc. Then we also narrow down environmental communication to geographical context, where we have local, regional, national environmental communication that is pro versus anti. When we have pro-environmental campaign messages, we are talking about campaigns that are promoting pro-environmental behaviors or behaviors that are aimed to support the environment, recovery, resilience, as we are talking now. And we have the denialists, especially in climate change and some others. We have people that deny the utility of the environment or environmental communication strategy. So just like the environmental communication is diverse, so is the environment, right from under to the surface to the above, right from what is on top of the surface, whether it is animal, human, material, and what have you. And in all these, when you talk about the environment, you are talking about the world and what is in the world, the people, everything. You cannot separate them, even though there may be specializations and what have you. And that is why, even in the definition of the environment, we talk of the natural environment, biological environment, physical environment, and you cannot separate it with man-made socio-cultural and economic system, because some of the issues involved in the environment, there are economic issues, there are cultural issues. We are told of the forests in the village where no one can. These are environmental issues. They are framed within our culture. So it has economic dimension. It can be global, like climate change. It can be global, and it can also be local, like some of the environmental issues that we battle with in our various communities. And it consists of soil, air, rocks, animate and inanimate being, and what have you. So one of the subsets of the environment that affects both below the surface and above is climate. When we are talking of climate, we are talking about atmospheric condition, whether the temperature, today the weather is cold, whether it is rainy, whether it is cloudy, whether it is windy, and what have you. In every day we talk about the weather, but over a long period of time, we are talking about the climate. The weather or the climate has implication a lot for environment, because any slight changes in the weather affects everybody in the system. You can see some people say their flight yesterday was delayed because of the rain, and what have you. You can see how increase in heat is affecting the economy, is affecting health, and what have you. So climate change, especially in recent years, is one of the environmental issues that has been drawing our attention, especially because in recent years it has been changing. In some areas the climate is cooling beyond normal, in some areas it is heating up, and this is leading to a number of things. Of course, we subsume all these under what we call climate change. Some people call it global warming initially, but now people know it more as climate change. The UN framework for Convention on Climate Change defines it as changes that are directly or indirectly caused by human activities over and above natural variation. We know climate varies naturally, but anthropogenic activities, that is human activities, have led to the variation to become so severe, so intense, that we are having sea level rise. Those living in coastal and riverine areas, they know what I'm talking about. That those living in savanna areas, they have seen the temperature is becoming so hot, hotter than they are used to. We are seeing floods, we are seeing typhoons, we are seeing in North Pole and South Pole increased cold, icing, and we have seen also a lot of impact. So This climatic activity lead to this heat, to these flows, to this sea level rise, to this storm. And it has a lot of implication on our health, on our economy, on the land that we use, on our food system, and what have you. The interesting thing with climate change is that it manifests differently to different regions. While one region may be crying of one impact, another region might be crying of different another set of impact. But it is something that is global, that the science have confirmed that it is real, that it is happening, despite the denial discussed by few politicians and few or marginal scientists to say that what is happening, it is natural, it is normal. What are the effects of this climate change? These are some of the effects. I give an example with rising sea levels. Those in the coastal area, a lot of land is being taken up by water, and it has a lot of implication for our life, a lot of economic losses that countries, individuals, communities suffer as a result of issues relating to climate change. Rising temperature. We know how thermal discomfort is an issue, even at home, in schools, in places of work, and what have you. And also in some part of the world, drought and heat-related illnesses. And it is even leading to extinction. A lot of people, it is not an ideological crisis per se. It is partly a resource-based crisis. Some people want to control the lake Chad, so the ideology becomes useful, and they have an ideological reason. They take guns, they have bombs, they buy arms from the Sahel, and they want to control a whole ecosystem, because the place becomes drier and drier, and the resource become more competitive. So violence becomes one of the way to control it, and what have you. So it has many other effects on various, in virtually all sectors. No sector is left as far as climate change is concerned. Then, because of that, as human beings, we need to sit down and think, what is the way out? Scientists, community members, people have sat down and made a lot of analysis, and we found out that there are either two key solutions to climate change. Number one, because the changes in climate happen as a result of long-term activities. We cannot just solve it within 1 year, 2 years, or a decade. So we have to adapt in such a way that, okay, the discomfort, the disadvantages, the damages done by climate change, how do we cope with it? Then another one is also to mitigate, to reduce some of these anthropogenic activities that we do, so as to reduce like use of fossil fuel. Therefore, we also use renewable. We use a lot of things. So the major key solutions to climate change is adaptation and mitigation. Some countries also practice climate engineering, to encourage the climate to behave in a particular way, to rain, and what have you. But all these are between adaptation and mitigation. So there are myriads of solutions identified by science, identified by community as a solution to climate change. One of such, which may not easily be reflected and be seen, is of course the media or communication. There are a number of institutions that are supposed to drive this adaptation and solution. Normally we turn to the environment organizations, whether it is public or private. We turn to scientists, we turn to community. But one institution also we turn to education institutions too. One community or aspect which is our concern is also the media. The media is also an important contributor to climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation, because media cover environmental issues. A lot of people know about a lot of environmental issues and solutions to environmental problems through the media. And so they raise a number of awareness, they educate the public, They also disseminate information that people need as far as climate change is concerned. And the media is also part of what is called collective action. Because it's a society problem, the media must be part of the solution. The media also contribute to public participation, so that because in environmental solutions to climate change, everyone's support is needed. And also, we need also, the media also drive policy. They inform people about policy, they contribute to policy, they serve as middlemen, and what have you. So the media has a very important role to play in adapting to or mitigating climate change. One of the ways to adapt to climate change is through what we call climate resilience. Climate resilience. And that is what we are going to talk about. Climate resilience is not only a concept that is related to the physical sciences, it is also a concept that is related to social sciences, to humanities. It is the ability of the society to increase its capacity to adapt, to prepare, to absorb, and to recover from climate-related hazard and long-term stress. Because of the climate change that we are experiencing, there are a lot of stresses. When we mention disaster, when we mention flooding, when we mention bushfire, when we mention even crisis, environmental-related crisis. So virtually, the world is in a kind of a stress. So resilience is talking about how do we adapt, how do we anticipate some of these stresses? How do we adjust some of these stresses? How do we recover? This is a flooded area. How do we recover it so that we'll be making use of it, either for fish farm or either for crop, and what have you. So that is what we refer as climate resilience. And this resilience is a concept that is also wide. It has economic dimension, finance dimension, it has physical dimension. The agriculturalists have their own resilience, the geographers have their own, the biologists, the ecologists, the conservationists, and of course the community, policymakers, and what have you. And whereas we are going to see, there is also the communicative side to climate resilience. Climate change resilience, one of the in resilience, one of the easily done activity is anticipation and preparation. In climate change resilience, we need to plan, we need to prepare, we need to anticipate. It's just like telling you this month, state A, state B, state C, they are going to have rain so and so meters of rain, and there will be a lot of flooding. So in other words, you anticipate. Some few months back, NEMA issued weather advisory about heat. There will be increase in temperature during the dry season, and a lot of people will be affected. So drink a lot of water, stay under the shade, do this, wear clothes that are environmentally friendly. It's all part of the resilience, early warning system. So this is a model of early warning system relating to flood only. You can see the risk that will happen relating to flood is the first bar in the model. First of all, they tell you that there is going to be hazardous rain, there's going to be some risk, and there's going to be some vulnerabilities. Water will rise above so meter, and a lot of things can happen within a particular period. Then, what are you going to monitor, or what are you going to warn? These are the decisions in the second bar. They will tell you there will be rainfall for so and so days, which will rise to so and so meter. It will the level of the rain water will lead to certain level, and you can be given a measurement in metrics, or they can be given a measurement in using a description, so that You understand. And therefore, that warning is sent to members of the community, to policymakers, to those that are living in areas where this is done. But how is this message sent? This is where the media comes in. Radio and TV. Of course, when NEMA or any other NGO or any other government agency or any other experts have knowledge about this issue, they can't reach individually, they can't reach us. That's where mass mediation comes in. Radio, TV, telephone, and the social media. But also within our communities, within our houses, we warn one another. It's just like there's going to be rain, so please carry your umbrella, or when going out, please take your umbrella. Or don't wear clothes that you'll be negatively impacted as a result of the rain. Or don't follow this road, follow that road, because when it rains, you know that road will close, etc., etc. Then we are talking about the last bar we are talking about is the response capacity. What is the society going to do when this scenario happens? That's where we mentioned evacuation center. Maybe you have to move and leave that to your house because it's going to flood the whole of the road. Or maybe there is a hospital nearby where you are going to stay. Or there is an organization or government is providing relief for such incidents of flood that happen, etc., etc. So in resilience, each scenario might have a different, how it plays out might differ, but the model is still the same. Just like we have seen for flooding, so is also other climate-related incidents. Then, in addition to how to cope, how to survive climate resilience, organizations also look at opportunities and convert these opportunities to challenge. One of it, for instance, is climate resilient agriculture. Because the way the climate change, some of the normal way communities, societies used to do their business related to environment will have to change. So therefore, government, NGO, and what have you, train people in climate resilient agriculture. Okay, now you have to plant drought resistant crops. Because of the shortage of rain in some areas, you have to plant crops that can survive drought. That's why scientists will go back to the lab and they will design crops that will resist it. You have to also design, maybe adapt to certain things. Like in some countries where there is too much flooding, instead of farming crops, they turn to fish farmers. They just turn their farm. Look, every year I farm, it will be flooded, so I remodel the farm to become a fish farm. Or I'm farming, I become an aquatic farmer. So these are some of the resilience. Okay, since the temperature is so hot and I cannot plant crop A, then I will move to crop B, which likes heat, or it can adjust to heat, and what have you. Sometimes it can be based on scientific invention or modification, and what have you. Sometimes it's based on the knowledge that our communities have, and what have you. Instead of, selling fresh fish and it will spoil by the roadside, why don't you just smoke it, take your time. When the float is low, transport will be easy and you move your fish, etc., etc. Then also, this is the climate, for instance, the example of the climate resilient agriculture. This is a training that is done by an NGO to women to plant some crops that are climate resilient. Another example is also climate resilient infrastructure. We are talking about coastal road. If we don't factor climate resilience in coastal roads, after some years, with the level of sea rise, these roads will be flooded, especially during heavy rains. So how do we make this infrastructure climate resilient? Right from the planning stage, that's why these things are done. You want to build a house, and you have seen every year that area is flooded. So what do you do in your foundation? You don't do normal level foundation. From the foundation, you raise it up so that even if it floats, it may not enter into the parlor. You will be dangle. It may cost you more, but in the long run, we are talking of heat. When you want to build houses, you need to consider thermal comfort. How many windows do I have? How do I place? Where do I place them? How do I make it easy for people to be comfortable in this? What type of things do I use to insulate inside the house? And what have you. Where do I put my solar panels? And what have you. So we are talking of climate resilient infrastructure, both by the government and also by communities. So these are some of the ways of achieving resilience. What are the key pillars of resilience? Number one is ecosystem restoration. How do we go back to those years when the forest, we used to get all our medicine, all our fruits, all our firewood, without destroying that forest? How do we go back to that? I'm just giving an example with that community forest that we are talking about. Same thing with our farm. How do we go back to normal farming without using organic fertilizer that has a health effect? How do we go back to rearing animals without all these climate-related crises? So that's the one key pillar of climate resilience. Then we are talking of resilient infrastructure. How do we adjust our infrastructure, build our infrastructure in such a way that this climate change that we say we want to reverse in a long term will not affect them? Then we're also talking about early warning systems, which I gave an example of. Then there is community empowerment. Climate resilience is not a top-down thing. It's not just a government policy or international framework, or it is in the academia. It is about the community. The community lives in the environment. How do you empower them to do that resilience? How can they empower themselves? How can you listen to the community when they want to do resilience and you work with them? In climate change communication, the top-down approach doesn't work a lot. So you have to think of bottom-up, middle, before the top-down approach. So that's why community need to be empowered to do what they can. A lot of knowledge about resilience is community-based. Just as we said, climate change impact is based on geography. Then, to build resilience, there is a framework that is designed by scholars. One of them is by Onsongo. He said, to build resilience, there is a cycle of activities that when you do them, you will help a community, you will help a society to build resilience. And as we said, resilience is also location or community specific. Understand the local climate, identify what are the vulnerabilities and the risk. You formulate what are the options to adapt to this risk. Then you assess and select ones that are high priority, and what have you. Then you implement the measures of resilience. After implementing, you monitor and evaluate their effectiveness. Then you review to go over again. So this is the model of climate resilience. Climate resilience is very important and is imperative, and communication has important role to play, because we are talking about human behavior, we are talking about knowledge, and what have you. And climate change communication has a number of roles and help to do in promoting resilience. But for resilience to be effective, you need to analyze or to understand these 8 principles of climate change communication. Know your audience, get your audience attention, translate scientific data to a concrete experience for people to understand. Beware of the use of emotional appeal. Yes, climate has its emotional sides, but beware of overuse of emotional appeal. It means you have to use a lot of logical appeals. Address uncertainties, scientific and climate uncertainties. This is what climate science deniers use. tap into social identities and affiliation, work with people based on their experience, that you know them and what have you. Encourage group participation and make behavior change easier. Wherever you are calling for resilience, you want me not to use, or you want to encourage me to use electric vehicle or CNG. If you don't make the process easier for me to convert my vehicle to CNG, it will be counterproductive. I'll say it's better I go to filling station and buy at 1,350 or 4 or 5 than to put CNG, because the stress, and what have you, is so much. These are the 8 principles of climate change communication. Moving to resilience. The major focus I will give in this is the message. What message are you going to give people to do climate resilience? You need to make use of targeted messaging. Targeted messaging in the sense that you identify your audience. We say the audience vary depending on what you want them to be resilient. You communicate, you talk to people, you send message direct or indirect, and messages should be self-paced, and messages should be in a discussion form. You also target, each message should target some specific network. You write from local angle, and you avoid stereotyping. You villagers, you don't like this, or you, this ethnic group, that is how you do this. Avoid stereotyping. You use hooks, concepts, ideas, metaphors from the audience own perspective. How do they look at agriculture? How do they look at public infrastructure? How do they look at transportation? Use their own perspective. Understand their needs, motivation, preferences. Appeal to their cultural values. Appeal to their specific religious values. Get ideas that resonate with them. So when you want to design message about resilience, you need to make use of targeted messaging. The third one I will recommend is what we call the 4 pillars framework for effective communication resilience. In designing messages about resilience, whether it is mediated or non-mediated, there are a lot of factors that you need to consider. The basic ones, you need credibility and trust. Are you credible to suggest a resilient measure? Are you credible to suggest an early warning system? Who are you to tell us that next month there will be a lot of flooding? You must have that credibility. Are you trained? Are you a geographer? Are you a weather expert? If you are talking about agriculture, are you that expert? If you are talking about communication, are you that? You must have that credibility. And the audience should have trust in you. These are baselines. But how do you do it? You also need their collaboration, and it has to be in a conversational way. It is not a one-way asymmetric kind of traffic. I am the expert. I am the communication scholar. I study communication. You must listen to my models. No, they might have beautiful way in which they are doing their communication. So you have to listen and integrate your climate resilience model. And in this key, there are also intervening pillars that you need to consider. Your message has to be simple and local. When we say local can be 2. National message can be local, but local going down to the grassroots. The message of resilience for citizens that are living in Lekki area might be different from the ones that are in, let's say, VI, let's say, Dolphin Estate, or some of these far areas from within Lagos. So you need to be simple and local. That means resilient communication is diverse form of communication. No one size fits all. Then that automatically means you have to do audience. The way married people look at it might be different. The way unemployed and the employed, the way farmers look at it might be different from cattle rearers, fish farmers, and what have you. You need to segment the audience. Even if you are going to use mass media for general communication, when you want them to act, You have to segment them. Then you have to use narrative. The next pillar is narrative, storytelling. It's much more powerful than the figures, than the result of your data, than the statistics by the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. It doesn't make meaning to someone in the rural communities. It doesn't make sense. Rather, tell them, stories that resonate with their experience about climate. Oh no, our forefathers, this is what they used to do. Crop does not spoil even if it is hot. The yam stays all years. 1 year throughout, the yam will not spoil. But now, just 2-3 months, because of it, the yam will spoil. You buy yam and you cut half, it has spoiled. What do they do? Then maybe you have a solution. How you can make yam storage resilient. It is then you reconnect it with those narrative. Then the last pillar is you need to identify actionable steps that are measurable, that are achievable. Don't bring some grand plans that when we take them to the local, they are not going to work. So what are the challenges for the use of environmental communication for resilience? Number one, sometimes climate information can be very complex. That's why up to today, some people don't understand climate change. What is the connection with increased temperature with this or climate with that? Then number two, there is also political polarization. We know how the coming of Donald Trump and a lot of climate science deniers have taken the world back. In fact, he's heavily investing in the fossil fuel, even going to war for fossil fuel. We know, whereas the previous governments in the United States have gone far in supporting the UN framework for climate change. And also some people have decided, so even locally here, we have politicians that say, look, I don't believe in this. So there is also a lot of misinformation, especially on social media. We have seen it during COVID-19. Science deniers, and what have you. Then there is also communication overload. This NGO is telling us this, this radio is telling us this, sometimes even in a contradictory way. This one will tell you, no, this one is the best practice. This one will tell you, no, that thing is not. So there is communication overload, there is public apathy. People are no longer interested in all these interventions by communities, by NGO, by government, by we, the scholars. Other challenges, of course, include funding. Communication is costly. Who pays? If Guardian wants to write messages on resilience, who pays the Guardian to do a one-page, to do an investigative story, to do solution journalism? Then there is also the limitation of journalistic norms. We write based on certain news values, news framework. We have to follow all this. We have deadline, It also affects stories about resilience. Then the media now is in transition. Traditional media is moving to digital. You know how confusing the thing is. One influencer can come and scatter everything that you have been working over the years. Then there is also other problems, social problems. When you begin to talk about resilience, someone will tell you, look, we are worried about bandits killing us. We are worried about kidnappers. You are even telling us about resilience. What? That will not be small thing. So other social problems can overshadow such messages. In conclusion, communication is an important enabler in climate resilience, and the society must consider its potential to promote climate resilience. There are many pathways to climate resilience. I just identified some of the key ones, and each of them have potency to be effective in climate resilience. So recommendations, I said more funding for journalists, social media influencers, and other public communicators in climate resilience. More researches in the area of resilience and communication. Media need to work with communities and government in information dissemination, education, and early warning related to climate resilience. Thank you very much.